Welcome to the Equity in Architecture Survey 2018 Early Findings presentation. I'm here today with Annelise Pitts, Equity by Design's Research Chair, and Kendall Nicholson, ACSA Research Partner, and they will be presenting the findings to you today. I would like to start by thanking our research partners and design committee and our design team. I would also like to thank our Equity in Architecture Survey 2018 sponsors, as well as the AIA San Francisco sustaining sponsors who commissioned not only the survey, but the findings and the symposium as well. So thank you, and we'll let Kendall and Annelise take it away from here.
Thanks, Rosa. As Rosa mentioned, the 2018 Equity in Architecture Survey was designed in partnership with the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture and over 50 volunteers from around the country, with the goal of generating a comprehensive national data set detailing the current positions and career experiences of architecture school graduates. With the assistance of Architecture's National Collateral Associations, AIA components, firms, and academic institutions, survey invitations were sent out to a broad cross-section of the profession in February of 2018. The resulting data set, which is the largest that has ever been collected on the topic of equity within the architectural profession, documents the experiences of 14,360 individuals representing all 50 states and nations on 6 continents. This unprecedented collection of professional voices is the testimony that allows us to build a deeper understanding of our strengths as a profession and to gain insight into the critical work needed to provide each individual within our field with opportunities to thrive and make a lasting impact within the communities that we serve. The analysis that we'll share with you today focuses on the differential experiences of professionals on the basis of personal identity, including gender identity, sexuality, race, and ethnicity. In alignment with this year's symposium theme, Voices, Values, and Vision, we present 3 closely related frameworks for understanding how issues of equity impact our professional and personal lives. Voices offers insight into professional and personal milestones that have the tendency to hinder career progression and influence decisions to leave the field. Values explores the personal and collective values that guide us in our careers and the ways in which the narratives that we shape about our professional worth influence our professional experiences. Finally, Vision enumerates the ingredients of a satisfying career in architecture and demonstrates ways in which individuals, firms, and the profession as a whole can take meaningful steps forward to advance equity within the profession. We'll begin with the demographics. As I mentioned, the survey garnered 14,360 responses overall, making it the largest survey ever conducted on this topic. You'll see that those identifying as female, who are represented in orange throughout the survey, make up approximately 46% of respondents, while those identifying as male make up approximately 53% of the survey respondents. Finally, we also had a small number of non-binary respondents, making up less than 1% of the survey response pool. Well, we had relatively even gender representation within our survey sample. We saw that the survey pool was disproportionately white. This, unfortunately, is actually a fairly good representation of the racial and ethnic breakdown of our fields, with about 78% of respondents describing themselves as white or Caucasian. This year's respondent pool was large enough that we were able to conduct meaningful analysis, not just on white respondents and respondents of color, but also on individual racial and ethnic groups with 500 responses or more. Those groups include Asian or East Indian, Black, Hispanic or Latinx, white, and multiracial respondents. Our survey respondent pool predominantly identified as heterosexual or straight, with approximately 7% of the pool identifying as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. It's worth noting that male respondents were significantly more likely than female respondents to identify as gay or lesbian. We're not sure what's at stake in that finding, but it's something that we'd like to explore further. Our data also showed an exciting trend. While we see that overall there are real diversity issues within the profession, our poll revealed that the most diverse respondents were also the youngest respondents, with the pool growing progressively more male and more white as we looked at our older respondents. What that means for us is that we're bringing a new group, a new more diverse cohort into the profession, and there's a more diverse pipeline than ever that we need to foster and allow to grow into the profession, so that hopefully someday this wedge-shaped chart actually becomes a flat line that's pegged more at the sort of diversity spread of this younger group. From a practical perspective, though, this distribution, this age and experience distribution meant that we had to make some adjustments when we were analyzing our data so that we were really looking at things apples to apples. For instance, we saw that the median level of experience for a white male respondent was 15 years. Meanwhile, the median experience level of a Black female respondent was 6 years of experience. And so what that means for us when we look at things is that if you look at your average, if you compare just an average white male respondent to an average Black female respondent, you're conflating issues of experience level with issues of personal identity. And so when you see things that are mediated by both experience level and personal identity, you'll often see us charting things against years of experience to provide an apples to apples comparison. In both 2014 and 2016, we began our presentations with mega graphics that showed a sort of conceptual framework for thinking about the life of an architect. This year, we wanted to continue that practice, but we also wanted to use the mega graphic, not just to show you a conceptual framework, but actually to show you a data-driven way of thinking about some of these career pinch points that we've been talking about now for 5 years. So what you'll see is that we've mapped all of our respondents to the survey by personal identity, and then we've shown how those respondents are distributed through key personal and career milestones. And the big trend that we see here is that the profession isn't particularly diverse to begin with, but as we start moving along as we start moving from left to right along the chart to the final career milestone, which is roughly approximated to represent glass ceiling, we see that our most diverse populations are distributed predominantly into the most junior levels of the profession.
Thanks for that introduction, Annelise, and for covering the demographics. So a big part of supporting a diverse pipeline is encouraging a wider range of students to enter architecture school. We found that the majority of our respondents of all demographic groups reported that one or both parents had finished college. This suggests that we as a field could do more to attract first-generation college students. We also saw that Black and Hispanic or Latinx respondents were more likely than others to report that neither parent had finished college, suggesting that we could also increase the diversity of the pipeline by better communicating the social relevance of the profession to diverse communities. Another important consideration is making education affordable so that students from all socioeconomic backgrounds can enter the fields without crushing debt. Mirroring a national trend, our respondents indicate that average debt at graduation has climbed steadily over the years, with the highest debt levels amongst those who were in school during the most recent recession. Because master's degrees are becoming prevalent, it's also important to note that these post-secondary degrees come, on average, with increased debt levels at graduation. That being said, it was puzzling to find that increased average debt level is not associated with higher average salaries to support loan repayment. At every point in their careers, respondents with master's and bachelor's degrees earn statistically similar amounts. This also means that a woman with a master's degree earns less on average than a man with a bachelor's degree. Because a master's degree is not typically associated with increased pay, our respondents with master's degrees tended to carry higher debt levels for longer after graduation than their counterparts with bachelor's degrees. This was especially true for Black men with master's degrees, who still carried an average of $55,000, or about 6 times as much debt on average, as an Asian female with a bachelor's degree 10 years after graduation. Once in the profession, we saw that those in the first 5 years of their careers, or paying dues, had experiences and career perceptions that differed in important ways from their more senior counterparts. While those early in their careers were more likely to report having enough time to do their work and to pursue interests outside of work, we also saw that they tended to struggle to make meaning of this work and ultimately were less likely to plan to stay in their current position. Additionally, we saw important advancement gaps emerging amongst respondents, even from an early point in their careers, with white respondents more likely than respondents of color to report moving from a production role into a project architect role within the first 7 years of their careers. We did see some clear factors that were correlated with early career retention. Early career professionals who said that their employers didn't provide training and those without friends were less likely to plan to stay in their current positions. And those who said that their work positively impacts their community, those who build relationships within their firm, and those who receive one-on-one coaching were more likely to stay. In short, it seems that personalized attention from peers and firm management, as well as impactful work, make a big difference in a junior employee's decision about where to work.
Our next career milestone, or career pinch point, caregiving, is navigated differently by respondents on the basis of gender. Amongst respondents working in architecture firms, we found that male respondents were more likely to be parents at every point in their careers than their female counterparts. Believes that a big difference in the likelihood of male respondents being fathers than female respondents being mothers at any point in their careers is actually related to differences in the ways that women make decisions about their careers relative to their parenting roles. When we looked at likelihood of a respondent being a mother by her current career track, we found that those who were practicing architecture were least likely, practicing architecture in a firm, were least likely to be mothers at every point in their careers. Meanwhile, those who are working as sole practitioners were dramatically more likely to have children than those who are practicing in firms at any point. And finally, those who are working in fields beyond architecture had a likelihood that was somewhere in the middle. So what this suggests to us is that female respondents seem to be leaving architectural practices and moving into sole proprietor roles in order to facilitate motherhood. A big part of this difference in female respondents and male respondents' decisions around their professional lives related to parenthood has to do with the different roles that our male and female respondents reported taking on in their children's upbringing. We found that 44% of mothers reported being the primary caregiver for their child, and that's compared with only 5% of male respondents. These differences have really big salary implications. We found that while on average, both male and female primary caregivers earned less on average than their counterparts who said that their partner took on the greater weight of caregiving, we found that, women who took on secondary caregiving roles didn't see the same salary bump as men who took on secondary caregiving roles. And what that means is that when families make economic decisions about who's going to put most of the effort into raising a child, there seems to be a real financial incentive, in our field at least, for men to become the secondary caregiver and for women to become the primary caregiver. This obviously holds all women's salaries back. The final career pinch point, glass ceilings, illustrates gaps on the basis of personal identity in the attainment of firm leadership positions as well as thought leadership positions within the profession. One of the important things that we've learned as a group at Equity by Design is that it's really hard to be something that you can't see. And so it was disheartening to see that when we asked our respondents who was leading their firm, what we found was that most respondents worked in a firm that was led all or completely by white leadership teams, and most of our respondents worked in firms that were led all or completely by male leadership teams, meaning that there are less examples of diverse role models for the diverse pipeline that we've been talking about that's entering the profession today, possibly making it harder to imagine attaining a leadership position in the future. And we see that some of this is actually borne out in the data. At every point in their careers, men were more likely than women to report aspiring to be a firm leader. We also thought that it was interesting that these aspirations became less and less common over time, suggesting that although the vast majority of people entering the field aspire to lead a firm one day, by the time that we get to about 15 years of experience, those aspirations have waned. And so we've talked about what the broad cross-section of the profession looks like, but it's also important to look at any individual's likelihood of being a firm leader by years of experience. And what we see, there is some heartening news, which is that in the time that we've been conducting this survey, it does seem that the leadership gap between white men and white women has narrowed substantially. However, while the gap between white men and white women has narrowed, we've actually found that respondents of color, both male and female, likelihoods of being firm leaders has actually gone down, increasing the gap between respondents of color and white men in terms of likelihood of being a firm leader at every level of experience. This suggests that as we think about equity, about implementing equity initiatives within the workplace, we need to be very careful to make sure that these practices extend to everybody and not just to a select few. One of the reasons that we think we perhaps saw so much frustration around promotion was a real lack of transparency in terms of how promotion was achieved. When we asked our respondents what the top criteria for promotion was, we saw that many staff simply didn't know, and that even between those at mid-levels of leadership and principals within firms, there was often substantial disagreement. But it's worth noting that according to principals at least, the top criteria for promotion are project outcomes, client relationships, and projects won. In our next section, values, we take these individual stories of personal milestones and struggles, and we try to extend those narratives to think about what we value as individual architects and whether a more diverse range of stories might also result in a more diverse range of personal values amongst those who make up our community. And then also extended that discussion to think about what value we might provide to society as a profession, and whether there are ways of taking a broadened perspective of who makes up our community and how that might translate to a broader perspective on the value that we can provide to society. So one of the aha moments that we had when we were conducting our literature review and writing the survey was reading a paper about something called the continuum of personal values that suggests that for every society there are 10 core values, and that individual societies gravitate towards different parts of this spectrum of core values. More importantly, that spectrum exists along two key axes. Is a society more oriented towards the personal or towards social values? And are they more oriented towards maintaining the status quo and avoiding change, or towards growth and self-expansion? This is true of cultures, but it's also true of professions. And so when we asked this question of our architecture respondents, we saw that overall there are we really live in this one quadrant of the continuum of values. And architects as a whole tends to be focused mostly on the personal and often on the change, growth, self-expansion parts of the spectrum. However, when we look at our values and break it down by personal identity, what we start to see is that we're not a monolithic group. And if we start to think about expanding our ideas of who an architect is and what an architect does, the question of our values is actually an identity charged issue. It's actually an equity charged issue. And so as we think about building a more equitable profession, we actually have to expand our notion of what we do to be much more inclusive. We also thought that it was interesting when we asked not about an individual's professional values, but about the values that guided a firm. We saw that for all respondents, regardless of identity, the top 3 responses were client satisfaction, profitability and growth, and collaboration and teamwork. Now, if you compare that to the continuum of values, these items seem like they would be on the complete opposite end of the continuum of values, more focused on the sort of change avoidance stability and more focused on the collective. And so I think that this begs a key question as we think about how we're evaluated within our firms. Are we being evaluated against our ability to cater to these firm values, or are we being evaluated against our adherence to the molds of the sort of ideal professional?
Finding the right fit. So one of the most important ways of working in accordance with one's values is finding a working environment that's in alignment with one's personal values. Our respondents reported working in a wide variety of environments, with most working in firms, but with a small number running sole proprietorships, as well as a small number working in settings other than these. We have called this group Beyond Architecture. Within the Beyond Architecture group, the most common industries were higher education and training, especially for women, construction, and real estate and development, especially for men. This year's survey included a special track of architectural educators, and we look forward to sharing those more specific findings on this group's experiences in the coming months. Among those working within architecture firms, we saw striking commonalities, both in what led respondents to choose where to work and in factors that were strongly correlated with their likelihood of staying in the profession. The most common reasons for taking a job in architecture were project quality, culture, and learning opportunities. Meanwhile, those who said that they weren't recognized for their contributions, that their work didn't make an impact, and that they didn't know their firm's values were less likely to plan to stay in their current positions, while those who said work positively impacts clients and who received one-on-one coaching and feedback were more likely planning to stay. This suggests that personalized attention and feedback, being able to measure one's professional impact, and clarity around values and guiding principles are essential to employee retention.
A firm's values are also expressed in the decisions they make around how to compensate their employees. This year's data indicates that there are gender-based pay gaps in every single project role within the profession, with those gaps increasing as the seniority of a position increases, so that amongst design principals, we found that male respondents made approximately $20,000 more per year than their female counterparts. We also observed race and gender-based pay gap at every level of experience within the profession, with the largest pay gaps between white men and Black women. A part of this pay gap is attributable to the different ways in which personal advancement strategies are valued on the basis of personal identity. While both male and female respondents who took initiative to build client relationships made more than those who did not engage in this type of work, we found that the rewards that male respondents who took on this sort of labor were much larger than the rewards for female respondents who took on this sort of work.
Another important way of understanding a firm's values is understanding what actions they take to make sure that all individuals within an organization have an opportunity to thrive. When asked what their firms did to mitigate bias in a number of areas, including hiring, performance evaluation, compensation, and promotion, we found that most bias mitigation strategies are seldom employed in architecture. We would encourage everyone listening to this presentation to study this slide in more detail to understand some of the techniques that could be used to address a variety of different types of workplace bias. We were also interested in what firm leaders were doing to promote workplace equity more broadly. While we found that most respondents reported that their employers hired employees from diverse backgrounds, we saw that less was done to foster an environment within the firm that supported the growth and development of diverse talent, and to build a culturally intelligent organization better equipped to serve the needs of diverse clients and user communities. Critically, we found that less than 10% of respondents reported that their employers discussed equity with clients, suggesting that we have substantial opportunities as a field to provide greater value to our clients by creating equitable environments that treat all users with dignity.
Earlier in the presentation, we examined the ways in which our individual voices contribute to a broader understanding of the challenges that each of us face and that we face as a profession. We then examined ways in which this collective testimony could inform a broadened understanding of values that guide us individually and as a professional community. We'll conclude the presentation of key findings from the 2018 Equity in Architecture Survey by building upon these earlier conversations to provide a framework for advancing equity within our firms and in our design work.
And this starts with the metrics of success. Equitable work environments are environments where every individual has the opportunity to thrive. And for us, a big indicator of thriving is being able to express career satisfaction in a holistic and comprehensive way. To test this, we developed a panel of 20 questions on career perceptions that we've called the metrics of success. These questions assess perceptions from whether a respondent has enough time to do their work to whether a respondent feels that they are a valued member of their team. During the analysis phase, we performed a factor analysis, which allows us to see the relationships between these questions and to find points of commonality to consolidate metrics used for predictions. This analysis revealed that there are 3 distinct factors in career perceptions in architecture. The first one, culture and relationships, measures a respondent's relationship to those that they work with, including peers and their firm's management. A respondent's likelihood of planning to stay in their current position is also a part of this factor, suggesting that relationships are key to retention. The next factor, engagement and impact, measures a respondent's perceptions of their work itself and includes whether a respondent feels that architecture is the right career for them and how satisfied they are in their career. The final factor, work-life, is very simple. Does a respondent have enough time to do their work, and do they have enough time to pursue interests outside of work? We'll organize the following analysis around ways that individuals and firms can enhance career perceptions in each of these key areas. Moving on to work-life, we wondered, what does success look like in each of these areas? On the whole, we found that respondents with positive career perceptions differed from those with negative career perceptions in important ways. Compared to those with negative work-life perceptions, those with positive work-life perceptions were likely to say that they worked very long hours on a single day, only infrequently. And they reported being more likely to say that their firms placed value on employee growth and culture, more likely to say that their personal schedule needs were factored into project schedules, and more likely to say that they could use work-life benefits without adversely impacting their promotion opportunities. Meanwhile, those with positive work-life perceptions were less likely to have suffered a host of personal and professional setbacks in the face of work-life challenge, and dramatically less likely to report working long days of 10 hours or more on a weekly or more frequent basis. To us, this means that employees with positive work-life relationships have workplaces that value their individual needs when considering business decisions and also that our common assumptions about the damaging nature of long hours in architecture, which tend to focus on 50 to 60-hour work weeks, needs to be adjusted. Rather, we see significantly diminished perceptions associated with 40 to 50-hour weeks, especially when these work weeks include long days, suggesting that we may need to move the goalposts when thinking about how to address long hours within our profession. Indeed, while most of our respondents reported averaging 40 to 50 hours a week, most respondents also reported having suffered from work-life challenges that required them to make either personal or professional trade-offs. It's also worth noting that it was far more common for respondents, and especially women, to report that they made personal trade-offs when faced with these issues, with 6 in 10 women reporting that their physical and/or emotional health had suffered as a result of work-life conflict. Our respondents reported that their employers used a variety of strategies to promote work-life, with the most common ones being providing autonomy in day-to-day scheduling, making work-life policies available to all employees and not just to parents, and promoting those who utilize work-life benefits. Given the frequency with which the last factor occurs in our slides as a top predictor of success, it's also worth pointing out that only 28% of men and 34% of women reported that using these benefits would not adversely impact promotion opportunities. This suggests that about 7 in 10 respondents work in environments where taking advantage of work-life benefits is associated with making trade-offs in future promotion eligibility.
The next factor, culture and relationships, comprises a variety of measures that assess an individual's relationship to their peers and to their firm's management. We found that white male respondents tended to have more positive perceptions in each of these areas than women or respondents of color. We also saw that those with positive culture and relationships perceptions differed from those with negative perceptions in important ways. Those with positive perceptions were more likely to say that their employer intentionally created an equitable workplace culture, conducting cultural competence audits, establishing culture and relationships as a core firm value, calling out bias incidents when they occurred, and ensuring that work-life benefit use doesn't impact promotion, and actively mitigating bias in policies and procedures initiated by the firm. An important component of culture and relationships perceptions is feeling included in the workplace, or in other words, feeling like you can be yourself at work while simultaneously feeling like a valued member of your team. When we asked our LGBTQ respondents whether they felt comfortable sharing their gender identity or sexuality at work, we found that while most respondents felt comfortable sharing this information with friends and family outside of work, and even with peers at work, there was more hesitation in sharing information with company leadership, clients, consultants, and especially contractors. It's also worth noting that white men tended to feel more comfortable than others sharing this information, suggesting that we need to do more work to make everyone in the LGBTQ community feel included, regardless of other aspects of personal identity. The final factor in the metrics of success, engagement and impact, tracks an individual's relationship to their work. We found that compared to those with negative engagement and impact perceptions, those with positive perceptions were more likely to take pleasure from helping their organization to grow, more likely to say firm leaders discuss equity with clients, more likely to say that their work impacted society at large for the better, and their personal families for the better, and finally more likely to say that firm leaders called out bias incidents when they occurred. This suggests that employees who are most excited about the work that they're doing and who feel that the work is most meaningful and impactful are also employees who can trace their impact within their own firms and believe that their work is making a positive impact in the broader world. So working our way outward in terms of spheres of influence, we were interested in knowing what respondents were recognized for contributing to at work, and found that the most common sources of recognition were work ethic and drive, creativity and design, and project management. It's worth noting that women were much more likely than men to report being recognized for their work ethic, which may be a contributing factor in some of the work-life issues that we looked at earlier. Even if we struggle to articulate the value that we provide to our coworkers, it's worth noting that most respondents in our survey believe that their work is making a positive impact in the world, with approximately 75% of respondents either agreeing or strongly agreeing with the statement, "My work makes a positive impact in the world." As a profession, we should consider this to be one of our primary strengths, because it's not true in every profession. When asked whom their work impacts, however, respondents tend to be a little bit more varied in their responses. While most would agree that their work positively impacts their clients, their firms, and even occupants and end users, we found that respondents were less likely to say that their work positively impacted their local community, their family, society at large, and especially underserved communities, with only about 10% of respondents indicating that their work served these groups. This suggests that as a profession, we should capitalize on, or we have an opportunity to capitalize on our belief that we cause an impact, but to think carefully about whom our work positively impacts and to expand our realm of influence. Thank you.